They gathered behind closed doors, presidents, veterans of power, fathers of the continent's diplomacy. Step down now, Ibrahim, before you doom us all. Their words echoed through the marble halls of Addis Ababa, but Traoré, eyes cold and unwavering, stood alone. What followed next wasn't rebellion, it wasn't surrender, it was something no one expected, something that would ripple through Africa forever. When is defiance dangerous? And when does it become destiny? Get ready for a shocking turn on. Courageous voices. The grand marble halls of the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa stood eerily silent yet heavy with unspoken tension. Behind closed doors, power converged. 5 men weathered by decades in office and guardians of what they saw as order sat in an arc of authority. The president of Nigeria spoke first, voice low but sharp, calling the gathering urgent and unavoidable. From Ghana, a veteran leader tapped his pen impatiently while Rwanda's president, calculated and cold, leaned forward with precision. Senegal and South Africa completed the circle, each carrying the weight of their nations, but united by unease. Ibrahim Traoré had arrived, or rather been summoned. His presence, however, was not honored. They saw him as reckless, dangerous, even too young. One muttered, too militant. Another added, a destabilizer, said the third, voicing what they all thought, but hesitated to say aloud. The doors opened quietly, and Traoré entered without ceremony, dressed simply, posture unwavering. He scanned the room, no greetings, no smiles. He knew what they wanted. The Nigerian president didn't waste time. You must step down peacefully before this spreads beyond Burkina Faso. His words echoed through the chamber like a final verdict. Traoré listened in silence, face unreadable, letting the weight of their fear settle. In the room outside, Addis hummed quietly under the afternoon sun, unaware that history trembled just beyond its government walls. The elders believed they were guiding him back into line, but as Traoré's jaw tightened and his eyes burned with quiet resolve, the real question loomed unspoken. Was this wisdom speaking or fear desperately clinging to fading power? What bold stance will Traoré take next? Stay with courageous voices. The doors creaked open again, this time without the usual fanfare or aides carrying folders. Ibrahim Traoré entered alone, save for the stoic figure of Captain Zongo, his loyal security chief, who remained wordless at his side. No entourage, no translators, no sign of deference. The elders shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Their staffs had tried to block his path, but Traoré had refused protocol. He was not here to play politics, he was here to be heard. Without invitation, he took a seat, his presence slicing through the carefully constructed decorum like a blade. The presidents exchanged uneasy glances. Cameras had been banned for the session, but even without recording devices, the tension was immortal. The accusations began immediately, poured out like old grievances. You are destabilizing the region, accused Nigeria. You risk drawing foreign intervention, warned Ghana. Rwanda's leader was more cutting, calling him a boy soldier playing with fire. Traoré remained silent through it all, his fingers lightly tapping the polished table, eyes unwavering. Zongo stood behind him like a shadow. Minutes stretched painfully until the wave of condemnation ebbed. Only then did Traoré speak, voice low, but cutting through the room like a judge's gavel. I served Burkina Faso, he said, pausing just long enough for his words to sting. Not your comfort. Silence followed, heavy, suffocating silence. The elders had expected arrogance or pleas, anything but this calm defiance. For a moment, no one knew how to respond. Outside, Addis carried on obliviously, yet, inside that room, the temperature dropped. The elders realized they were not dealing with a reckless youth. Traoré had come to battle for ideals, not permission. The meeting dragged on into the night, voices growing sharper, words now edged with threats rather than advice. The elders no longer masked their frustration. Offers became ultimatums. Economic sanctions would be immediate, political isolation certain, military blockades if necessary. They painted a grim future where Burkina Faso would be choked into submission. Step down, warned the South African president, his voice now hard. Before this becomes something darker. Traoré listened still and composed. But the cracks behind his stoic exterior were beginning to show back in Ouagadougou. His ministers were already in panic. Urgent messages flooded in, each pleading with him to reconsider. Even his closest allies urged caution. Think of the people, Ibrahim, one advisor said over a scrambled call. If they cut us off, our markets will collapse. There will be no fuel, no medicine outside palace walls. Another pressure mounted. Social media had ignited like wildfire across the continent. Hashtags of support clashed with bitter warnings. Youth groups hailed him as a revolutionary, the voice of Africa's new generation. Others questioned his judgment. Will he betray the revolution? One trending post asked, the sentiment echoing from Lagos to Dar. Traoré retreated to his quarters just before midnight, surrounded by the quiet hum of a city holding its breath. Captain Zongo stood guard at the door as the young leader sat alone, the weight of a nation resting on his shoulders. Midnight came, and with it his answer. He stood and signed a short defiant communique, rejecting the ultimatum outright. No flowery language, no room for negotiation. Traoré knew the path forward would be brutal, but he also knew the elders had miscalculated one thing. He did not fear isolation, he feared surrender. What dramatic defiance will unfold next? Keep watching Courageous Voices. By dawn, Ouagadougou was already awake, though not with fear, but with fury and resolve. News of Traoré's rejection of the elders' ultimatum spread like wildfire. Radios crackled in market stalls, phones lit up in dusty courtyards. Students left classrooms not in protest of their leader, but in unity with him. The city's arteries filled with people, mothers carrying infants, students draped in the national flag, market workers who paused their daily trades. Their chants rose with the heat of the morning. Son, we are Burkina Faso, echoed through the streets, louder than any government decree. They did not call him reckless, they called him theirs. As images of the mass gathering circulated, the elders sat thousands of miles away, stunned. This was not the Burkina Faso they imagined. They had dismissed Traoré as a lone wolf, a temporary noise in the storm of African politics. Instead, they now faced a rising tide they had not anticipated, people who believed their president represented something more than authority. He was hope in a continent exhausted by compromise, yet even as chants filled the air and victory seemed within reach, darker murmurs began threading through the noise. ECOWAS was bruised by Traoré's defiance. Quietly convened, meetings behind closed doors hinted at something more forceful. Whispers floated through embassies and military circles alike. Intervention, not in words, but in force. Back in the presidential compound, Traoré stood at his window, watching the swelling crowds. From afar, they were shouting for him now, but he knew well enough that cheers could turn to screams if tanks rolled in. Captain Zongo entered quietly, face grave. ECOWAS's moving pieces, sir, he warned. Traoré nodded slowly, his face unreadable. The streets belonged to him for now, but history rarely left victory unchallenged. The air inside the presidential palace thickened as whispers turned into undeniable truths. Trust, once Traoré's greatest weapon, began to fracture. At first, the betrayal was a rumor, unthinkable, but by nightfall, it became clear. A general, long considered loyal, had leaked sensitive intelligence to foreign diplomats. Details of Traoré's defensive plans, troop placements, and the weaknesses of the capital's outer defenses were now in hands that could twist them into a dagger. Word came quietly from Captain Zongo, whose face betrayed none of the chaos churning beneath. It's real, he said simply to Traoré. Dismissed the room, leaving only his most devoted circle, but even that circle felt smaller, hollowed by paranoia. Names were exchanged in hushed tones, eyes darted. No one spoke openly of the general, but his absence from morning briefings said enough. The corridors of the palace, once alive with certainty, grew quiet outside. Rumors spread like wildfire through Ouagadougou. A coup imminent. The people sensed it before the officials confirmed it. Supporters began gathering outside the palace gates as human shields, as if sheer willpower could stop what might come next. Alone in his war room, surrounded by maps and flickering monitors, Traoré knew speeches wouldn't save him. He pressed record on a small handheld camera, his voice steady, eyes fierce. If I fall, he began softly, let history judge me. Free. He paused, The weight of the statement settling like dust. I stood not for power, but for Burkina Faso. He ended the recording and handed it silently to Zongo. Outside, gunfire in the distance cracked the night open like a warning shot from fate. The coup wasn't a question anymore, it had already begun moving in shadows. The night fell unnaturally heavy over Ouagadougou. The streets that had been alive with chants only hours before now stood hushed, tense, as if even the wind dared not whisper. Then at precisely midnight, the silence shattered. The first tanks emerged from the northern barracks, their treads grinding mercilessly against the cracked asphalt as they pushed towards the presidential palace. The coup had begun inside the compound. Ibrahim Traoré stood surrounded by faces far younger than the enemy. Approaching, they were not career soldiers or seasoned strategists, they were junior officers, volunteers, and street fighters, loyal not to his title, but to his defiance. Captain Zongo, calm despite the thunder inching closer, issued sharp, clipped orders. No one flees, we hold. The palace gates trembled as shells began slamming into the outer walls. Lights flickered, then vanished completely, plunging the entire capital into darkness. For a few agonizing minutes, it seemed as though chaos would swallow them whole, but something stirred deep among the shadows. Resolved young fighters held their positions, refusing to abandon the man who had refused to abandon them. Gunfire ripped through the night as the defenders pushed back fiercely. Rooftop snipers, grenade volleys, and hand-to-hand clashes turned the palace grounds into a war zone. What the plotters assumed would be swift and surgical spiraled into a brutal stalemate. By 4 a.m., the rebel tanks halted, caught in a fierce crossfire they hadn't prepared for. An eerie quiet returned just before dawn. When the sun finally broke through the dust and smoke, it revealed the impossible. The coup had failed. Traoré stood at the top the battered palace steps, flanked by exhausted but unbroken loyalists. His enemies had underestimated him. More importantly, they had underestimated the will of the people who stood ready to bleed beside him. What unexpected triumph awaits? Stay with courageous voices. Morning broke not only over Ouagadougou, but across the entire continent. The images arrived in waves. Burned-out tanks littering the palace gates, young fighters standing with raised fists. Ibrahim Traoré, bruised but unbowed, greeting his people like a leader reborn through fire. In Addis Ababa, the elders gathered once more, but gone was the iron certainty that had shaped their first meeting. The same table, the same hushed hall, but a new atmosphere marked not by dominance, but by disbelief. No ultimatums were spoken this time, only quiet murmurs filled the space between them. How had this young man, isolated and outgunned, defied both the coup and the collective weight of their will? Their confusion hung heavy, clinging to the gilded walls like smoke from a fading era. Without preamble, Traoré's face appeared on the large monitor mounted before them. The satellite link crackled slightly as he leaned forward, eyes steady, words measured. He did not gloat, he did not beg. Africa belongs to its youth now, he said, his voice carrying across borders and bruised egos alike. Respect is earned, not inherited. For a moment, none of the elders spoke. Not Nigeria, not Ghana, not Rwanda. The usual sharp tongues and rehearsed wisdom fell away, leaving only the weight of Traoré's declaration ringing in their ears. They had witnessed coups before, they had survived rebellions and crushed insurrections, but this felt different. This wasn't a simple battle for power, it was generational. As the feed ended abruptly, they sat in stunned silence, each man privately wondering if they had just witnessed the end of their era. The room remained frozen long after Traoré's image faded. For the first time, the elders found themselves without a script. Barely a week after crushing the coup, Ibrahim Traoré made his next move, one that no elder had predicted. He stood before the nation and without hesitation extended an invitation that would ripple across the continent. To every youth leader, activist, student union head, and rising political voice from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, he offered an open call: come to Ouagadougou, the new Africa Summit, he declared. His words, broadcast live and unfiltered, will not be decided by those who held power yesterday, but by those who must carry it tomorrow. The invitation spread like wildfire. Within days, the capital transformed from a fortress to a gathering ground. Flights arrived carrying sharp-eyed young ministers, university presidents, grassroots organizers, and digital activists. They came hungry, not just for dialogue, but for belonging. Yet behind the scenes, Africa's traditional leaders seethed. Many boycotted the summit entirely, dismissing it as dangerous theater. Still, not all followed. Younger ministers, those frustrated by years of ceremonial politics, began arriving quietly, slipping in without official sanction. Hotel lobbies became arenas for whispered debates and daring alliances. When the summit opened, Traoré stood before hundreds, his speech cutting through doubt. He spoke of independence not from colonizers, but from complacency, of revolutions fought not with rifles, but with ideas. Applause thundered through Ouagadougou, carried not by senior statesmen, but by the heirs of a restless continent. By dawn, something rare had been born, not formalized, not yet written into treaties, but potent. An informal continental alliance rooted in youth solidarity and mutual defense. What started as a gamble became a statement. The elders could boycott the room, but they could no longer control the future it had just defined. Months passed and the dust that once clung to Ouagadougou's battered streets began to settle. What had started as survival soon bloomed into stability. Burkina Faso's markets, once threatened by isolation, began to hum with renewed life. Traoré, never waiting for permission, struck bold trade deals directly with sympathetic neighbors. Mali and Guinea, already disillusioned with the old order, became natural allies. Together, they reopened crucial routes and signed pacts rooted in mutual respect rather than top-down decrees. Slowly, fuel returned, shelves filled, and salaries stabilized. Traoré's defiance no longer felt reckless, it felt necessary. Beyond borders, his name transformed from whispered caution to battle cry. In South Africa, student movements invoked his speeches during campus protests, demanding an end to geriatric monopolies on political power. In Senegal, a new wave of young candidates campaigned under banners that read simply, "Respect is earned." The elders, once kings of quiet diplomacy, found their voices growing faint. Summits they hosted saw thinning attendance, proposals they tabled met polite indifference. In backroom meetings, aides whispered what none dared say aloud. They were becoming relics in real time. Traoré, meanwhile, remained deliberate and careful. He did not declare victory or rub salt into the wounds of those who doubted him. Instead, he expanded his reach quietly. He invited more youth delegations. He pushed regional conversations online, bypassing traditional gatekeepers. His governance model, heavy on participation and light on hierarchy, began taking root in places no one expected. Burkina Faso became something of a symbol, fragile, still scarred, yet fiercely independent. The revolution had evolved beyond him. It was no longer just about resisting the old, it had become about building the new, and everywhere his name was spoken, so too was the idea that perhaps at last Africa's future belonged to its sons and daughters. What revolutionary change lies ahead? Stay with courageous voices. Seasons turned, but the echoes of Ouagadougou did not fade. Across the continent, sparks ignited in places that had long stood silent. In Niger and Chad, young officers citing Traoré's defiance ousted aging rulers. In university halls from Kenya to Zimbabwe, students organized under banners calling for generational change. Some movements were graceful, powered by vision and unity, others turned volatile, slipping into chaos and vendettas masked as revolution. The elders, once symbols of stability, now watched as the world they built began to fracture under the weight of ambition and impatience. Not all the fires were righteous, not all the voices were wise, yet the pattern was unmistakable. Africa's youth had stopped asking for a seat, they were taking the table. Amid this turbulent shift, Traoré himself grew quieter. Victories tasted different now, muted by the realization that inspiration could not always be controlled. He ruled, but more carefully. He listened more, spoke less. One crisp morning, far from the speeches and chants, he traveled quietly to Johannesburg alone, without cameras or aides. He stood before the towering statue of Nelson Mandela. For minutes, he remained there, eyes scanning the carved face of a man who had changed a nation with resolve and restraint. Traoré's voice broke the stillness, barely above a whisper. Was this the right way? He asked, not expecting an answer. The wind offered none across the world. Leaders and citizens watched him from afar, some hailed him as the herald of a long overdue reckoning, others saw only danger, a continent flirting with instability masked as revolution. Yet Traoré knew better than most. History, like power, never answers immediately, it only watches patiently as those who dare reshape its course wrestle with the cost long after the crowds have gone quiet. What do you think? Is Traoré a hero rewriting Africa's future or a dangerous spark in an already fragile continent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw, and untold African stories that the mainstream won't show you. On Courageous Voices, hit the like button to support independent narratives and share this video. Let the world join this powerful conversation. F